My fiancée slept with my best friend after I paid for our entire wedding, so I ended everything silently, and now she's begging for closure she'll never get. I'm a 28-year-old guy, and when I got engaged, I genuinely believed that love meant stepping up financially without hesitation. I grew up watching men in my family prove their worth by providing, so when she said yes, something in me flipped into responsibility mode. I told myself, this is what real commitment looks like. She used to look at me with this mix of relief and admiration and say things like, "I don't know how I got so lucky," or, "You're so stable, so rare." Every time she called me husband material, it felt like confirmation that I was doing things right. When she cried about wedding stress, I'd pull her close and say, "Don't worry. I've got it." And she'd smile and whisper, "I know you do." I paid for almost everything without keeping track. Venue deposits, catering tastings, the photographer she had to have, multiple dress fittings because the first one didn't feel right. I even covered flights and hotel rooms for some of her family because she said it would mean the world to her. Watching the numbers drop in my account scared me sometimes, but I felt proud too. Like I was building something solid brick by brick. My best friend, someone I'd known for over a decade, was always around during all of this. He came to planning meetings, helped load decorations into his car, joked with me about how stressful weddings were. He'd clap me on the shoulder and say, "Man, you really found the one. She's perfect for you." Hearing that from him made everything feel even more real. There were small things I noticed but brushed off. Inside jokes between them that I didn't quite get. Late-night planning calls that went longer than expected. The way they sometimes looked at each other before answering my questions. I told myself I was overthinking it. Stress does weird things to people, right? I trusted them completely. I truly believed loyalty was the one thing money couldn't buy, and I was certain I already had it. Somewhere along the way, the wedding stopped being something we were planning together and became something I was carrying almost entirely on my own. My days started revolving around invoices, payment deadlines, and vendor emails instead of my own life. I'd wake up to notification pings and fall asleep doing mental math, telling myself it was temporary, that sacrifice now meant peace later. She leaned into the role of the overwhelmed bride completely. "I feel like I'm drowning," she'd say, sitting on the edge of the couch with her face in her hands. I'd kneel in front of her, rub her knees, and promise, "I'll handle it. Just focus on being happy." She'd look at me with watery eyes and reply, "I don't deserve you," which somehow made me want to give even more. I picked up extra shifts. I sold things I cared about. I told friends I couldn't come out because I was saving for the future, even when the future felt like a black hole swallowing my present. Every payment felt heavier than the last, but I wore it like a badge of honor. Real men provide. That's what I kept telling myself. My best friend became even more involved. He'd show up with coffee during planning sessions, joke with her to lighten the mood, and tell me, "You're doing amazing, bro. She's lucky as hell." Sometimes, he'd speak for her during discussions, finishing her sentences before she could. It felt odd, but I brushed it off as familiarity. He'd known her almost as long as I had by then. What started to bother me was how invisible I felt in decisions I was paying for. I'd suggest something simpler, something cheaper, and she'd sigh and say, "You don't get it, it's my wedding." My best friend would laugh awkwardly and say, "Happy wife, happy life, right?" And I'd force a smile. Late at night, when the apartment was quiet except for the hum of the fridge, I'd stare at the ceiling and feel this tightness in my chest. A small voice whispered that something wasn't balanced anymore. I ignored it, because admitting it meant questioning everything I was building. I've known my best friend for over 10 years, long enough that I never thought I'd need to guard myself around him. We'd grown up together, screwed up together, bailed each other out of bad decisions, and sworn loyalty like it was permanent. When I introduced him to my fiancée early in our relationship, it felt natural, almost necessary. He was part of my life, so of course he'd be part of hers too. He was always around after that. Too around, if I'm being honest. He helped us move into our place, stayed late after dinner, volunteered to run errands for wedding stuff without being asked. He'd sit at the kitchen table while she and I went over budgets, chiming in like a third partner. "Nah, man, go with the nicer option," he'd say. "You don't want regrets on your big day." And I'd nod, because why wouldn't I trust him? He had this way of hyping me up that felt reassuring at the time. "You're doing everything right," he'd tell me. "Most guys would complain, but you're built different." When doubts crept in, his confidence drowned them out. If my fiancée snapped at me or brushed off my concerns, he'd laugh it off. Wedding stress, bro. It messes with everyone. There were moments I remember now that feel off in hindsight. The way they'd exchange looks when I mentioned money. How he knew details about her day she hadn't told me yet. Once, I walked into the living room and they stopped talking mid-sentence. She smiled too fast. He grabbed his phone like he'd been caught doing something wrong. "Just logistics," she said. "You know how it is." I told myself I was lucky. Lucky to have a partner everyone loved. Lucky to have a friend who supported my relationship instead of competing with it. I even defended them when someone joked that he was basically part of the couple. I laughed and said, "Nah, that's my brother." But sometimes, late at night, replaying the day in my head, I felt this dull unease settle in my stomach. A question would surface: why does he feel so involved? I pushed it down, because questioning him felt like questioning my own judgment, and I wasn't ready to do that yet. The first real crack didn't come with yelling or tears. It came quietly, in a way that was easy to explain away if I wanted to. She told me she was meeting a vendor one afternoon to finalize some details, something she said would only take an hour. I checked my phone later that evening and saw a missed call from my best friend around the same time. When I asked him about it, he hesitated for half a second too long before saying, "Oh, yeah, she asked me to swing by and help carry some stuff." Later that night, when I casually asked her how the meeting went, her story didn't quite line up with his. Not dramatically, just small details that didn't match. Different times. Different locations. I laughed it off at first, but the discomfort lingered in my chest like a bruise you keep pressing to see if it still hurts. When I brought it up gently, she sighed and rubbed her temples. "Why are you interrogating me?" she asked. "I'm exhausted. You know how stressed I am." Her tone made me feel like I'd done something wrong. Before I could respond, my phone buzzed. It was him. "You good?" he texted, followed by, "She's just overwhelmed. Don't read into it." That was the moment I felt the ground shift under me. Not because of what they said, but because of how coordinated it felt. Two people I loved closing ranks without even realizing it. I apologized before either of them did. "I'm sorry," I told her. "I'm just tired." She softened instantly, kissed my cheek, and said, "I know. We're both under a lot of pressure." After that, it became a pattern. Any question I asked was framed as insecurity. Any concern was labeled stress. If I pushed back, he'd step in with a joke or a reassuring comment that made me feel silly for doubting them. "Man, you're overthinking," he said once, laughing. "If anything, you should be proud, she brags about you all the time." I started second-guessing myself constantly. Every instinct I had, I rewrote to sound more reasonable, more trusting. I told myself love meant giving people the benefit of the doubt, even when it felt uncomfortable. But late one night, lying in the dark, listening to her breathe beside me, I felt a knot tighten in my stomach. Something was wrong. And for the first time, I wondered if ignoring it might cost me more than peace. The midpoint of all of this didn't happen during some dramatic confrontation. It happened on a random night that felt painfully ordinary. She was in the shower, steam fogging up the bathroom mirror, music playing softly through the door. Her phone buzzed on the nightstand beside me. Once. Then again. I wasn't snooping, I swear that, but the screen lit up just enough for the name to register. My best friend. At first, I told myself not to touch it. I stared at the ceiling, trying to slow my heartbeat, trying to be the calm, trusting partner I'd always been. Then another notification came through. And this time, part of the message preview was visible. Last night felt different. I can't stop thinking about you. My hands went cold. I picked up the phone without thinking, my fingers moving on instinct like my body already knew what my mind was still denying. The message thread was right there. No passcode. No effort to hide it. Just weeks, months, of conversations I was never meant to see. Inside jokes. Flirting. Late-night planning sessions that had nothing to do with the wedding. One message from him said, "I hate sneaking around, but I don't regret it." Another from her replied, "Neither do I." He'd be crushed if he knew. I felt like the air had been punched out of my lungs. My ears rang. I sat there scrolling, reading timestamps, matching dates to nights I'd worked late or fallen asleep exhausted while they were apparently together. Every red flag I'd ignored snapped into place all at once. The bathroom door opened. Steam rolled into the bedroom. I locked the phone and placed it back exactly where it had been. She walked out wrapped in a towel, smiling at me like nothing in the world was wrong. "You okay?" she asked. I nodded. Somehow, I nodded. Inside, something shifted. Not rage. Not tears. Just this eerie calm, like a switch had flipped and cut off everything warm. In that moment, I knew confronting them wouldn't give me answers, it would only give them a chance to lie better. So I said nothing. I kissed her forehead. I told her I was tired. And as I lay there beside her, staring into the dark, I made a quiet decision that would change everything, one they wouldn't see coming at all. The hardest part wasn't knowing the truth. It was pretending I didn't. Every morning after that felt like stepping onto a stage and playing a version of myself that no longer existed. I still said I love you. I still asked how her day was. I still transferred money for wedding payments with steady hands that didn't match the storm in my chest. Once I stopped confronting them in my head, I started noticing everything. The way her phone was suddenly always face down. How she'd step into the bathroom to take calls and come back acting lighter, almost giddy. How my best friend stopped meeting my eyes when we talked, like he was afraid I could see through him. They both moved with the confidence of people who believed they were safe. I kept paying. Final deposits. Vendor balances. I smiled during cake tastings while my stomach twisted at the sweetness. She'd squeeze my hand and whisper, "We're almost there," and I'd nod, thinking about how wrong that sentence really was. Almost where? Married? Exposed? Free? One night, I overheard them laughing in the kitchen while I pretended to sleep. His voice dropped low, intimate. "You're sure he doesn't suspect anything?" he asked. She laughed softly. "He trusts us. That's why this works." The word "works" echoed in my head long after they quieted down. I didn't cry. I didn't confront them. I started documenting instead. Screenshots. Dates. Payment receipts. I checked contracts, cancellation policies, timelines. I learned things I never thought I'd need to know, all while playing the role of the devoted fiancé they took for granted. Being silent was isolating in a way I can't fully explain. There was no one I could talk to without blowing everything up. Friends still congratulated me. Family asked how wedding planning was going. I lied to everyone with a calm smile that felt glued onto my face. But underneath that calm, something else was growing. Not sadness. Not even anger. It was clarity. They thought my silence meant ignorance. They thought my generosity meant weakness. What they didn't realize was that every day they felt more comfortable, I felt more detached. More prepared. And the closer we got to the wedding, the more certain I became that they had no idea how close they were to losing everything they thought they'd secured. The moment I truly hit rock bottom wasn't when I read the messages or overheard their whispers. It was standing at a long table in a softly lit venue, surrounded by sample centerpieces, realizing I was actively paying for the environment where they'd been sneaking around behind my back. The room smelled like fresh flowers and polish, and everyone kept smiling at me like I was a groom living his dream. The coordinator slid a clipboard toward me. "We just need the final signature and payment," she said cheerfully. My pen hovered over the paper while my chest tightened so hard it felt painful. I thought about the nights I'd worked late, the things I'd sold, the trips I'd skipped. All of it was right there in black and white, reduced to a number I was about to authorize. She squeezed my arm and whispered, "Thank you for doing this. I know it's a lot." Her voice sounded sincere, affectionate even. I looked at her face, this person who could lie so smoothly, and something inside me cracked. Not loudly. Quietly. Like a bone breaking without anyone noticing. I signed. Later that night, I sat alone in my car in the parking lot, hands still on the steering wheel, just staring straight ahead. I didn't turn the engine on. I didn't check my phone. I just sat there while the realization sank in. I wasn't just being betrayed, I was financing it. I was the reason they could move so freely, so confidently, without consequences. For the first time, the self-blame hit hard. How did I miss this? How did I let this happen? I replayed every moment I'd ignored, every instinct I'd talked myself out of. The pride I'd once felt for providing turned into something heavy and humiliating. When I finally went inside, she was already asleep, curled up comfortably in the bed I paid for. I stood there watching her breathe, feeling completely hollow. Not angry. Not heartbroken. Just empty. That was the lowest point. The night I realized love, loyalty, and effort hadn't protected me at all. They'd made me useful. Disposable. And standing there in the dark, I understood something terrifying and freeing at the same time. If I could survive this feeling, then I didn't need them anymore. I just needed to figure out how to leave without destroying myself in the process. Once I hit that numb, hollow place, something inside me shifted into survival mode. I stopped imagining confrontations. I stopped rehearsing speeches. Instead, I started planning like someone preparing to disappear. Every move had to be calm, clean, and quiet, because the moment they sensed a shift, they'd try to control the story. I began separating things without making it obvious. I opened a new account and slowly rerouted my income, small amounts at first so it wouldn't trigger suspicion. I changed passwords late at night, the blue glow of my laptop lighting up the room while she slept beside me. The apartment felt different then, like a shared space that no longer belonged to either of us, just a temporary shelter before escape. During the day, I reviewed contracts and cancellation policies like a lawyer preparing a case. Some deposits were non-refundable. Others had windows. I marked dates on my phone, not as reminders, but as countdowns. Each one brought a strange sense of calm. Control. Something I hadn't felt in months. They grew bolder as the days passed. He came over more often, staying late, sitting too close to her on the couch. She'd laugh in ways I hadn't heard in a long time. Once, she rested her head briefly on his shoulder, just for a second, then looked at me to see if I'd noticed. I pretended to scroll through my phone, my heart pounding but my face blank. "You've been really quiet lately," she said one night, studying me. "Just tired," I replied. It wasn't a lie, just not the whole truth. I stopped imagining a future with her. I started imagining a future without explanation. No shouting match. No dramatic exposure. Just absence. The idea felt powerful in a way confrontation never had. At night, while the city hummed outside and headlights swept across the walls, I lay awake thinking about how people like them fed on reactions. Tears. Anger. Begging. I wasn't going to give them any of that. The closer the wedding got, the more relaxed they seemed. Confident. Almost careless. They thought they'd won. They thought I was locked in. They had no idea I was already halfway gone, and that the day I left, everything they were standing on would collapse without warning. I didn't end things with a confrontation. There was no shouting, no dramatic reveal, no moment where I laid out all the evidence and watched their faces crumble. I ended it on a quiet Tuesday morning, the kind of day that feels forgettable until it isn't. The apartment smelled like stale coffee and rain from the open window. She was still asleep when I packed the last of my things. I moved slowly, deliberately. Clothes. Documents. The small items that actually mattered. I didn't touch anything that belonged to her. I left the engagement ring on the kitchen counter, centered carefully like it was part of a display. Beside it, I placed a short note. Not angry. Not emotional. Just honest enough to be final. I know. The wedding is canceled. Please don't contact me. That was it. By the time she woke up, I was already gone. I'd emailed the venue, the vendors, and the planner an hour earlier, canceling everything under my name. Some deposits were gone forever. Others weren't. I didn't care. Money was replaceable. My sanity wasn't. My phone stayed silent for almost 20 minutes. Then it exploded. Missed calls. Voicemails. Texts stacking up so fast I couldn't read them all. Where are you? What is this? Please answer me. Then his messages started. Short at first. Bro, call me. Then panicked. Whatever this is, we can talk it out. The confidence I'd seen in them for months evaporated instantly. I didn't respond. I turned my phone face down and kept driving, watching the city fade into something unfamiliar. My hands shook on the steering wheel, but my chest felt lighter with every mile. It felt like stepping out of a burning building and realizing you'd been holding your breath the entire time. Later that night, when the sun dipped and the world went quiet, I finally checked my phone again. Hundreds of messages. Apologies. Excuses. Blame. I deleted none of them. I didn't block anyone. I just didn't reply. And in that silence, I could feel something new forming, panic on their end, and a fragile, unfamiliar sense of freedom on mine. The messages changed tone after a few days. The panic gave way to strategy. It was almost fascinating to watch from a distance, like observing a storm from behind thick glass. First came confusion, I don't understand what's happening, then concern, are you safe, and finally, the rewrites. She sent long paragraphs late at night, messages so carefully worded they felt rehearsed. I need to explain, she wrote. Things aren't what you think. You deserve closure after everything you've done for me. Closure. That word showed up a lot, like a magic key she thought would unlock my silence. She framed herself as overwhelmed, lost, confused by emotions she didn't plan on having. Not once did she say she was sorry for the betrayal, only that I'd misunderstood it. He reached out separately, of course. His messages were shorter, more defensive. It just happened, he said. I never meant for it to go this far. Then came the classic deflection, you were always working. She was lonely. Reading that made something inside me go cold. 10 years of friendship reduced to excuses and blame shifting. They both tried to pull me back into conversation, but in different ways. She appealed to history and emotion. We were building a life, she wrote. Don't I at least deserve a conversation? He appealed to loyalty. We've been through worse than this. Don't throw everything away over one mistake. I noticed how neither of them talked about accountability. There was no mention of trust, respect, or the fact that they'd lied to my face while taking my money. They wanted dialogue, not responsibility. A chance to reshape the narrative into something more comfortable for them. Each message I read made my decision feel more solid. The clarity I'd felt before sharpened into resolve. I didn't feel tempted to reply. I didn't feel curious. I felt done. I let the messages pile up unanswered. I let them sit with the discomfort they worked so hard to avoid while I was there cushioning it for them. What they didn't understand was that silence wasn't cruelty. It was the consequence they never thought they'd face. Silence did something to them that confrontation never could. Without my reactions to feed off, they were left alone with the reality of what they'd done. I heard about it slowly, through mutual friends who reached out with hesitant messages like, "Are you okay?" And I didn't know how to ask, but, what happened? I didn't defend myself. I didn't explain in detail. I just said, I found out the truth, and I walked away. That was enough. The story spread on its own, the way real stories always do. People noticed the canceled wedding, the sudden absence, the missing explanations. Questions followed, and without me controlling the narrative, the truth leaked out anyway, awkwardly, imperfectly, but honestly. I never had to expose them. Their behavior did that for me. She tried again after that. A voice message this time, her voice trembling, raw in a way I'd never heard before. I can't sleep, she said. I don't know how to live with this. Please. I just need to hear your voice. I listened once. I didn't replay it. I didn't respond. Friends told me he was spiraling too. Drinking more. Isolating himself. Reaching out to people who no longer answered. The same confidence that once wrapped around him like armor had collapsed, leaving him small and defensive. Knowing that didn't bring me joy, but it did bring me certainty. For the first time in a long while, I wasn't responsible for fixing anyone else's mess. I focused on myself instead. I found a new place. I slept without waking up tense. I ate meals without that knot in my stomach. The world felt quieter, steadier. Silence became my boundary. It protected me from being pulled back into arguments that went nowhere. It kept me from reopening wounds just to soothe their guilt. Every day I stayed quiet, I felt a little stronger. And somewhere in that quiet, I realized something important. I hadn't lost anything worth keeping. I had escaped. But she wasn't done trying to reach me yet, and the final message would prove just how badly she needed something I no longer owed her. Months passed. Not weeks, months. Long enough for the shock to fade and the consequences to settle into their lives like permanent stains. I had almost stopped checking my phone at night, almost forgotten what it felt like to brace myself before opening a message. Almost. Then one evening, as rain tapped softly against the window of my new place, her name lit up my screen again. The message was longer than the others. Softer. Smarter. I know you don't owe me anything, it began, which was how I knew she was about to ask anyway. She wrote about therapy, about taking accountability, about how she finally understood how much she hurt me. She said she wasn't asking to get back together, just to talk. Just to have closure. I can't move forward without it, she wrote. I sat there for a long time, phone in my hand, the room dim except for the lamp by the couch. I thought about the version of me who would have replied instantly. The one who would have explained, reassured, tried to help her heal even while bleeding himself. That guy felt like someone I used to know. Because closure isn't a conversation. It's a choice. She had chosen betrayal. She had chosen secrecy. She had chosen to take my trust and my money while lying to my face. And I had chosen to leave without performing my pain for her comfort. That was the boundary. That was the lesson. I didn't block her. I didn't reply. I placed the phone face down and let the silence do what it had always done, protect me. For the first time, I felt something solid where the emptiness used to be. Peace. Not loud or dramatic. Just steady. Earned. She'll always wonder what I would have said. And I'll always know that walking away quietly was the most powerful thing I ever did. That was my closure.